My name is Claire and I'm 34 years old. When I was 9 years old, I found a receipt in my father's coat pocket. It was from a jewelry store, a purchase my mother never received. I remember standing in the hallway, the receipt shaking in my small hands, and hearing my parents' voices drop low behind a closed door. That was the night I learned that love could hide things. That silence could be a kind of lie. For 25 years, I tried to build the opposite of that hallway. I promised myself that whatever home I made, it would have no closed doors, no shaking hands, no secrets folded up small enough to hide in a coat pocket. I became the kind of person who checked in. Who asked questions out loud instead of swallowing them. Friends called me intense. I called it self-preservation. I checked in on friendships. I checked in on my parents' marriage, even after I moved out at 18, watching for the same silences that had once frightened me as a child. I turned that vigilance into a career, too. I became a project auditor, the person companies hire to find the small inconsistencies before they become big problems. My coworkers joked that I could smell a mistake in a spreadsheet from across the room. I never told them where that instinct came from. Then I met Daniel. He was 36, an architect, the kind of man who left sticky notes on the mirror before early flights. Little things. Coffee's on. I love you. Don't forget your umbrella. 6 years into our marriage, he still did that. He remembered that I liked the porch light left on when I got home late, that I couldn't sleep without the window cracked an inch, that I needed 10 minutes of quiet after work before I could talk about my day. 2 months ago, on a Tuesday morning, I found one that said, "You make ordinary days feel like something worth having." I remember standing at the kitchen counter, the coffee maker hissing behind me, reading it twice, thinking I had finally built the opposite of that hallway. I had built a home where nothing needed to be hidden in a coat pocket. 3 weeks ago, everything cracked. I was doing our taxes, sitting at the kitchen table with a lamp on and 12 months of bank statements spread out in front of me, when I saw it. A charge from the Hollowbrook Inn, 40 minutes outside the city. $412. Dated a Thursday in March, a day Daniel told me he was in Ohio for a client site visit. I remember the small, cold sound the paper made when I set it down. I remember the refrigerator humming in the background, and how loud that hum suddenly felt. I didn't say anything that night. I told myself there was an explanation. Client dinners get complicated. Maybe a coworker booked a room under his card by mistake. That old instinct from the hallway, the one that wanted to smooth things over and stay quiet, rose up in me for a moment. But the auditor in me, the part of me that had spent 12 years finding inconsistencies for a living, would not let it go. I gave him 3 days of silence while I quietly gathered every piece of evidence I could find, every statement, every calendar entry, every mismatched story, every excuse he'd given me over the past year that suddenly didn't line up. On the 4th night, at 8:40 p.m., I sat across from him at our kitchen table, the same table where he'd proposed 4 years earlier, and I asked one question. "Why does the bank statement say you were at the Hollowbrook Inn on March 14th, when you told me you were in Columbus?" Daniel's face changed in a way I will never forget. Not confusion. Recognition. He knew exactly what I was asking before I finished asking it. "It's not what you think," he said. That sentence. The oldest sentence in the world. "Then tell me what it is," I said. My voice didn't shake. I had promised myself, all those years ago in that hallway, that if this day ever came, my voice would not shake. He didn't answer. He looked at the table. The silence lasted 11 seconds. I counted them. That silence told me everything the receipt in my father's pocket had told me at 9 years old. Some people don't lie with words. They lie by choosing, again and again, not to speak. Here is what Daniel didn't know. 2 weeks before that conversation, I had already found her name. Rachel, a coworker from his firm, 29 years old. I found the hotel loyalty account linked to his email, the one he forgot he'd set up with autofill. I found 3 more charges going back 14 months. I printed every one of them. I made copies. I met with a lawyer on a Wednesday afternoon, sitting in a small office with gray carpet, and I asked her one question: if this is what I think it is, how do I protect myself? She told me something I have never forgotten. She said, the person who moves quietly and calmly, before the storm, is always the person who ends up standing when it's over. So while Daniel thought I was still 3 days behind, confused and guessing, I was already 14 months ahead. I had already moved half our savings into an account he didn't know existed, an account that was legally mine to open under our agreement. I had already spoken to my sister, who offered her spare room without a single question asked, no explanation needed. I had already scheduled a locksmith for the following Monday, and quietly asked a neighbor, a retired police officer named Walt, if he'd keep an eye on the house that week. I didn't tell him why. He didn't ask. None of it was cruel. None of it was petty. It was simply careful. I had learned, at 9 years old, standing in a hallway with a shaking receipt in my hands, that the people who wait until the storm arrives to protect themselves are usually the ones left standing in the rain. The one complication came from a place I didn't expect. My mother-in-law, Patricia, called me 2 days after that kitchen table conversation. She had heard a version of events from Daniel, softened and rearranged, the way stories are when the person telling them is trying to survive their own guilt. Marriages go through hard seasons, she told me. You have to think about what you're throwing away. For a moment, just a moment, I felt that old pull, the one that had followed me since I was 9 years old, the instinct to smooth things over, to make the hallway quiet again. But I thought about the sticky note on the mirror. I thought about what ordinary days worth having was supposed to mean. And I said, I'm not throwing anything away, Patricia. He already did that. The following Sunday was Daniel's mother's 60th birthday. The whole family gathered at Patricia's house, Daniel's brother and his wife, 2 cousins, a handful of old family friends. I almost didn't go. But I decided that I would not disappear from a family I had spent 6 years showing up for, simply because Daniel had made a choice that wasn't mine to be ashamed of. Dinner was quiet, the kind of quiet where everyone is being careful. Then Daniel's brother, Mark, trying to lighten the mood, asked about the house. Still thinking about renovating the kitchen? He asked. Daniel answered, we'll see. Things are complicated right now with the house. I set my fork down gently. The room went still, the way rooms do when they sense something is coming. Actually, I said, my voice calm, controlled, there's nothing complicated about the house. It's not ours. It's mine. It has been for 2 years. Daniel looked at me, stunned. What are you talking about? When we refinanced 2 years ago, I said, you asked me to handle the paperwork because you were traveling for the Denver project. I did. The house has been in my name alone since that closing. You never read the final documents. You trusted me to handle it. And I did handle it. Carefully. The table went silent. Patricia's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Mark's wife glanced at her husband, then quickly looked away, the way people do when they realize they've stepped into the middle of something they weren't meant to see. One of the cousins suddenly became very interested in refilling her water glass. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing for him to say, because there was nothing false in what I'd said. It was simply true, and it had been true the whole time, quietly, while he assumed I was the one standing on unstable ground. Mark cleared his throat and tried, weakly, to change the subject back to the birthday cake. Nobody followed his lead. The silence held for what felt like a very long time, though it was probably only 15 or 20 seconds. In that silence, I watched something shift on Patricia's face, not shock exactly, but recognition, the look of a mother doing quiet math she didn't want to do. This is not a mistake, I said, into the silence that followed. It has been mine for 2 years. Patricia set her napkin on the table. She didn't defend him. She just looked at her son with an expression I hadn't seen from her before, not anger, but a kind of quiet disappointment, the look of a parent realizing their child had built something on a foundation that wasn't there. I didn't raise my voice once. I didn't need to. Sometimes the truth is loud enough on its own. Daniel moved out the following week. I didn't fight him on the small things, the furniture from his childhood bedroom, his father's old tools, the record collection that meant nothing to me and everything to him. I packed those boxes myself, carefully, and left them by the door. Boundaries, I've learned, don't require cruelty to be real. 3 months later, I sat on my porch on a Saturday morning with a cup of coffee, the kind of ordinary morning that used to feel like something I had to fight for. The sticky note is gone from my mirror now. In its place, I write my own. Nothing dramatic. Just small true things. Today is mine. This house is quiet in the good way now. My sister visits on Sundays, and we've started a small tradition of planting something new in the garden every time she comes, herbs mostly, things that are easy to keep alive. Patricia still calls me on my birthday, and last month she asked if she could come by for coffee sometime, just the two of us. I said yes. Rachel, I heard, no longer works at the firm. None of that satisfaction matters as much as this, the quiet, undramatic peace of a home with no closed doors and no receipts hiding in coat pockets. The locksmith came, like I'd scheduled, and changed every lock in the house. I still have the old keys in a drawer somewhere. I haven't thrown them away. I don't need to. They don't open anything that matters to me anymore. If you've ever sat in a room and felt the walls of your own life tilt sideways, I want you to know something. You don't have to raise your voice to be believed. You don't have to fight loudly to win something back. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stay calm, stay quiet, and let the truth stand on its own 2 feet. Breaking a cycle doesn't always look like a scene. Sometimes it just looks like a woman at a dinner table, speaking softly, and meaning every word. If this story felt like something you needed to hear today, you're not alone in this room. Subscribe, because every story here is for someone who needed to hear it.